Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this meeting. We're going to talk about aligning capital flows with this question, are we on track? Now, maybe because I'm leading one of the major French environmental NGOs, I have my doubts about it. Is financial industry on track? Efforts are made, yes. There are reasons to be optimistic, yes. But the way to a green economy, to reach a green economy, financed by virtuous green investments, loans and bonds, is a long, long, long way. Some of you are aware, some of you are concerned about the climate change risks and consequences, risks for your investments and consequences for people of the world now and tomorrow. We'll see with our speakers that major financial industry firms they are creating tools, they are integrating TCFD's recommendations, they challenge their teams. But when you have a look at the global picture, rates are so low. So what's the matter with you people? Is financial world aware about climate change's consequences? Are you skeptical about climate change? Are you uninformed? Or maybe a bit cynical? Let's talk about it with our first speakers. Please join me on stage. Catherine Haworth, Padraig Oliver, Casey Rayner, and Laetitia Tancredi. Catherine? Please, Oliver. Padraig. Laetitia. Here. And Casey. On my left. Thank you for joining us. Catherine, we're starting with you. You're Chief Executive of Share Action, which is a civil society organization which promotes the highest standards of responsible investment. Green financing represents barely 0.5% of investors' portfolios, 0.5% of the overall board market, 15% of all syndicated loans. And last year, bank financing for extreme fossil fuels increased by 11% to 117 billions of US dollars. That's what we're talking about. What do you think about those rates?
Let me first of all, I just wanted to say how amazing it is to have another Green Finance Day in Paris, and to just congratulate the French in general for this powerful energy that's sort of emanating out of Paris on this agenda. And those of us that are based in London are very impressed and a little bit jealous. So do keep it up. And actually, we might maybe come on in the discussion to some of the ways that I think the French can really lead in the European really interesting moment that we're at with the Sustainable Finance Action Plan. But yeah, the global picture is quite sobering, I would say. So what we absolutely see in our analysis and surveys that we've been undertaking of the banking sector, the insurance sector, the global largest public pension funds, is that there are these pockets of leadership. And of course, those pockets of leadership demonstrate what's possible. And one of the things that's wonderful is that the leading institutions are also some of the most financially resilient and successful institutions, which absolutely shows that there's no trade-off whatsoever. In fact, as we all know, there's more and more evidence that decarbonizing your portfolio builds in potentially some alpha and certainly a lot of protection. But we have just vast numbers of what ought to be some of the most sophisticated, large institutional investors, still with no climate policy, still with no one on the board that's responsible in any way for climate finance. So, yeah, I think one of the really good things about this document that was published in association today, this stock take, is that it actually does give a really powerful and clear picture of the situation globally. We know what good looks like, we know that it's achievable, but we are nowhere close to where we need to move finance. And you know, maybe later on I can talk about some of the things that we can do to accelerate and how we can bridge the gap between what's happening and what's needed.
Why are we so far? Because it's a strategic matter for firms, for investors, for asset managers or asset owners.
So I think it's a puzzling matter. Why are some institutions really grappling with this, really thinking about this? I mean, let me take sort of the global insurance sector. Congratulations, AXA, on the announcements yesterday. There's a really small number of insurance companies globally that really get it, but I mean, it's shocking that a sector like insurance that is literally managing the physical impacts now in a very significant way around the world. I haven't seen the numbers on the insurance costs of the California fires, but it's not small change, we know that. And yet we've got this kind of disconnect between, on the one hand, increasingly sophisticated models in the insurance industry for kind of tracking and thinking about those liabilities, and then a total disconnect for most insurance companies in terms of their actual assets. Hardly any insurers are really thinking, how do we invest in climate resilience? How do we invest in the sort of infrastructure that would prevent insurance industry globally from picking up the costs, and of course of society from picking up the costs? Because what we're going to see is that certain communities will become uninsurable. Certain people will become uninsurable, and industries and sectors, because the insurance industry will look at it and say, we don't like the look of that. So the costs will eventually be exported onto society in a very big way. And we really do need to call out the insurance industry. I'm only calling on them. The pensions industry, it's the same, for adopting a much more joined up approach between what they're doing in thinking about liabilities and what they're doing on the investment and asset side of the house.
Efforts are made, and you've got a rating about it.
Sorry?
You've got a rating about efforts made by major firms.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we do at Share Action is something called the Asset Owner Disclosure Project. And this year we published, first of all, an assessment of the 80 largest global insurers in the world, and then in September, the 100 largest public pension funds. And I think it's incredibly important for the stakeholders of those institutions to see where things are at. I mean, again, Europe is leading. France is leading. There's some really good pockets in the Nordic regions, actually all over. And in the banking sector also, we see the European banking sector clearly leading the world. Unfortunately, one of the problems and challenges is that where you've got European banks commendably saying, well, we won't finance coal power plants, unfortunately, they're still getting financed from Asian banks. So we really need to move to a much more global picture. But it's fantastic that Europe is sort of showing what's possible. Let me give another little example of the kind of some of these kind of disconnects. So the leading institutional investors that we looked at in these rankings and surveys are allocating around 6% of their portfolio into low carbon investments and climate solutions. But their peer group as a whole, it's at a miserable 1%. So, it's what we need to do is close the gap between the 1% and the 6%, because everybody can get there and everybody will benefit from getting there, not just financially, but also, of course, environmentally. So that's one of the gaps. I also want to point out another. There's a gap between rhetoric and reality. So what we're seeing a lot now, which is great, is institutional investors and asset managers calling themselves green leaders. I mean, I'm going to name them just because, you know, they are the biggest beast in the global scene, which is BlackRock. I mean, the statements coming out of BlackRock are fabulous. I mean, they're commendable. The question is, are we going to get a match between the rhetoric and reality? I think so, actually. I think there's every indication that BlackRock will move at pace. But the role of civil society, observers, and other stakeholders is to hold accountable institutions that are saying the right thing now and make sure that the reality matches the rhetoric. Another little disconnect, I would say, very interesting one, I think needs more attention, is that initiatives like Climate Action 100+ are just so promising.
Yeah, we'll talk about
and we're going to talk about that. But the institutional investors that have committed themselves to engage in a really kind of robust way with the highest carbon companies in the world, sometimes in the same institutional investors, they've got a bond team that's busy refinancing corporate bond issuance from those high carbon companies. So there is an example where we've got to have a more joined up approach between the excellent work that's happening on engagement with corporate boards from the equities teams, and let's have an approach which says the bonds teams are also going to be saying, no, sorry, we don't refinance your corporate debt unless you've got a really strong and coherent Paris-aligned corporate strategy now. So those are some of the examples where I think we can see this gap being closed over the next few years, hopefully.
Maybe we can ask Laetitia about it. Laetitia Tanqui, you represent Climate Action 100+. What do you think about what Catherine just said?
Yes, actually, I'm steering committee member of the Climate Action 100+, and it's true. I think it's not. I mean, we don't live in a simple world. Of course, there's a lot of contradiction. But having said that, I truly think that this initiative is a huge opportunity for investors to make a difference, because you know it's very important, of course, that the flow to finance green projects increase. And as far as Ircantec is concerned, 6% of our assets finance ecological transition. So we do think that's very important. But we also think that with engagement, investors have the possibility to make a difference. And this initiative has already, because let me just give you an example. Let's say I have a victory with one company of the list. That would mean that I have a success on the 3 goals of the initiatives, which are first to have the company commit to implement a governance that will allow climate issues to be dealt at the board level. Then second, that the companies commit to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions in compliance to the Paris Agreement. And third, that the company report on what it's doing on climate-related issues. And of course, doing that, we want companies to also address just transition, like not to forget about the social consequences of this ecological transition. So if you have a success on these 3 goals with one company, you actually have a great impact, because those companies, those 161 companies on the list, they are the leaders on their sector. So if you have a success with this company, it's not only the company in its bubble which is changing, that's the whole supply chain. That may be competitors, that also smaller companies. So yes, we have still contradiction. We live in a world which is really complex, but with engagement, investors are saying companies that they can be part of the solution. So I think this is why this is very valuable.
You're advisor to the president of the board of trustees of Ircantec. Can you tell us about Ircantec? May I say that you're the good one? With a good behavior?
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, Ircantec tried to be very active on this topic, and I don't think that's because Ircantec trustees are better citizens. This is not what I want to say. I think it's because it's consistent with Ircantec's core value. I mean, it's not only consistent, it's a way for the scheme to implement its core value. which is maintaining solidarity between generations. Because actually, Econtech is a pay-as-you-go pension scheme, and the trustees think that for such a system to be sustainable over the long term, it's absolutely necessary that the people who are currently working and paying the pensions trust that when they will retire, they will also get pension, and that they will enjoy these pensions in a world where you want to live in. So for that purpose, Econtech thinks that it is in its mandate not only to consider the financial impact, but also the environmental and social impact of its investment decision. So when your core value is aligned with your strategy, I think it's a little bit easier. And so, but when you're an investor which doesn't have those kind of value, you have to find other reasons to want to tackle climate change. And then, we talk about, traditional financial analysis, risks and opportunities. And then the question is, when do you think this will occur? How significant it's going to be? And as we have different answers, we have different behaviors in the financial world. So, yeah.
And you decided for 2 years to stop financing coal. And now you're partly releasing from fossil fuels bonds.
Yeah, so Econtech decided to we signed the Paris Agreement, and then when you say, okay, I want to align my portfolio on a 2 degrees trajectory, okay, what does it mean concretely? How do you fulfill this commitment? And so, divesting from the coal industry, I think it was, it wasn't an easy decision to make, but it's quite a little easier than the decision we took around the oil and gas industry, because it took the scheme 1 year to think about this investment strategy, because we had to think about a lot of different issues. This is as I said, this is a very complicated world actually, and we still need oil actually in our day-to-day life. We don't necessarily have a substitute for everything. There are social impacts, like I was talking about just transition. There are a lot of employees in this industry. There are local population which are impacted by this industry, but there are also environmental, biodiversity, climate impact. There's a lot of elements to take into consideration. So yeah, it was quite a huge challenge for the fund to work on this, and so it took us 1 year. And the decision we took, it's not to divest totally from this sector, but to have a kind of in stratégie d'investissement ciblé, the targeted investment strategy. I don't know if that's very correct, but so, and then the fund will take the next 2 years to work on its asset allocation to see how it can go beyond what it's going to implement right now. But the key point in this decision is to align. To support the transition to a 2 degrees economy, and not only just to divest right now, because I think it would not be sustainable.
Thank you, Patrick Oliver. You've published your global landscape for 2018 about financial flows related to climate change. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I believe there will be a slide coming up now about the numbers. So these numbers represent our global landscape of climate finance series that we've done almost every year since 2012. And just to clarify what these numbers represent, so these are financing that we track into new projects and new activities every year. So they're a bit different from a lot of the actions that institutional investors are making, or insurance companies in investments, what's happening in capital markets, in stock exchanges. We're trying to track actually new construction finance, shovels in the ground, who's financing what there, and also the loans to those projects as well, where they're coming from on the private side or on the public state development bank side, and as well as that projects in development finance in developing countries. And what we can see in the trend is a generally steady increase, and you can see there a big surge in 2014 and 2015, and then a fall in 2016 before we estimate, preliminary estimate I must add, that we think there'll be another rise again for 2017 figures. And what's behind these ups and downs, as you would say, is a bit of a story of around the structural change around how climate solutions are being financed and being deployed. Up until 2015, the story is mainly about renewable energy. It's about the massive scale up in deployment of wind and solar projects. And in addition to that, it's about the generous policy regimes that were in place in many of the major economies around the world to support that deployment. So you can see in 2015, for example, there was a large rush of projects to reach financial close, and that was because some of those policy regimes were starting to end at the end of 2015, so project developers wanted to get in there before that happened, that window closed, and that partially explains why the drop happened in 2016 then. But the other main reason behind that drop is actually also a good story, and that's also even more of a good story when you think about how much the rise was in renewables before 2015, and that's how the technology costs have come down so much. So even with solar PV technology costs coming down like significantly since in that period, and wind technology costs as well, we still saw these rises in investment. So there was so much activity going on that the technology cost wasn't showing up. But that was partially also to show in the fall in 2016, where there was still a significant drop in technology costs for solar PV in particular, and that was half the reason why there was a lower number of investment. But now, why we are bullish, you could say, about what we think is the final number for 2017 in that range, 510, 530, that represents about a 12 to 16% increase in 2016. And that's because the story is becoming less about renewable energy, where you've had that strong deployment, you've had that generous policy, and that structural change of that now, that technology is relying more on its cost competitiveness. But other segments of the climate economy are starting to come to the fore. So this year, for the first time, we managed to integrate electric vehicle investment into the numbers. And that's one of the main drivers that we can see that will kind of pick up the slack in terms of how the renewable energy industry is more kind of flatlining at the moment, but still at a very high level. The electric vehicle segment on its own has grown 54% every year on average since 2011. So it's times by half every year in that period. And what we notice is there is still a significant role in public finance in that sector. When you go to purchase your passenger electric vehicle, there is a lot of support for direct government grants and tax incentives that kind of subsidize the cost of that purchase. And we gather that represents around 22% of the overall investment in electric vehicles. But then the other important point to pick out is how the electric vehicle sector is kind of divided into two segments. One is the battery electric vehicles, which are fully electrified vehicles connected to the grid and charged by the grid. And the other segment would be the plug-in hybrid segment. And here, especially in Europe, we would consider that the plug-in hybrids segment is larger, because that was a technology that came along earlier. But in fact, the battery electric vehicle segment is finding the largest source of investment. And China has a big role in that. China represents 40% of the global EV market, and 3/4 of the EVs being sold in China are fully battery electric vehicles. So there's a good story there in 2017, where that increase is very much driven by more uptake in electric vehicles. And also, I must also add, on the public side, the development finance institutions, both national development finance institutions, bilaterals, and multilateral development finance institutions are starting to really up the game. We've seen massive increases in financing, in climate financing, coming from these players, especially in 2015 and 2016 from the national and the bilateral institutions. And then this year in 2018, the multilateral institutions reported a 28% increase. So that's another significant driver of that 2017 rise.
So it's very important, state policies, state commitments. It's very important to boost the financial markets. About the TCFD's recommendations, do you think that they are enough well known by financial world? Do we need to push them? Do we need to have TFCD's recommendations and TCFD's recommendation and TCFD's hard laws?
In terms of making them hard laws, it's a bit too early to say. We have to give it a bit more time to breathe, as it were. You know, the recommendations were made. There's been a lot of forums and workshops going on in London and other financial capitals about how to prepare your TCFD disclosure. We've yet to see, you know, what those disclosures look like, what the level of information is in them. We would hope, from our perspective, for our tracking work, you know, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in a lot of sectors of the economy, not just in the power and the passenger vehicles segments, but a lot of the other segments are falling very significantly far behind. So we think there's a lot of opportunity in those types of disclosures to provide that level of information, especially on adaptation and resilience investment. We still don't have very good clarity about what corporations, how they're managing their climate risk, what investments they're making to manage their climate risk, but also then how they are measuring the impact of those investments. And having the TCFD has very much kind of, we've seen, ignited a kind of plethora of initiatives, of a race to the top, as it were, for corporations to find out what are those best metrics to do. And we've seen that with Climate Action 100, for example, with Catherine's work as well, and with a lot of other initiatives like that, where people want to be seen to be the leaders, but we've yet to see, as Catherine said, the rhetoric matching the reality yet.
Thank you. Casey Rayner, you're a Senior Manager of Fund Development and Responsible Investment at Lloyd's Banking Group. So do you think we need laws to encourage financial sector on its way to green finance?
I think that's a really interesting question to pick up on. Do we need laws? So I think we need definitely clear regulatory frameworks within which to operate. I think we can see from the numbers that we saw previously, where there's government incentives, you see investors taking action. And so having real clarity around expectations from governments is really helpful in terms of directing capital flows, and making sure that we're not going to face into something that's going to change in 2 or 3 years' time. Because for some of these investments, we're not talking about a 3 or 5 year investment horizon. We're talking about a 30 and 40 year horizon, and perhaps longer. And so having some kind of clarity around what that legal and regulatory framework is going to look like is helpful. And I think the high-level ambition statement of the Paris Agreement is fantastic, but we've yet to see all of the enabling legislation come into play to make that happen. So if I were to think about how that might play out in my world just now, and this is a little bit about law and a little bit about regulation, and it speaks, I guess, to the point of why do we see this strangeness going on in organizations of saying one thing and doing something completely different? And part of it is to do with the structural makeup of investment vehicles. So if we look at old school institutional investment and pensions investment, we create an investment strategy that takes into account time horizon. And we are able to back that investment strategy with long-term assets. But over the last 10 years, and maybe more if you look at Australia, then we've seen this huge shift away from really asset and liability management on the pension side to a marketization of pensions, where we've put the onus on personal responsibility, where we've put our citizens into the market where perhaps they weren't before. And we've put them into something that structurally isn't really fit for purpose. So most of my pension customers are around 38, and they're going to be investing for the next 30 years. And yet, for some reason, I've got them invested in a highly liquid, daily priced investment vehicle that targets 3-year outperformance. So there is a structural mismatch between the investment ambition and the types of structures that we have in place. And that itself leads to investment decision making that is very narrow in its focus, very equity-based instead of real asset-based. And my concern is that kind of upwards chart that we saw, it may reach an inflection point and start heading in the wrong direction. Because what we've had is a whole raft of institutional money that could go into originating long-term debt, which is what we do on our defined benefit side. So we can originate loans and put them on our balance sheet. But I can't do that in my defined contribution side, in my new pensions side. And so I worry that we're seeing an avenue of capital flows structurally dry up as that side of the pension schemes grow and we lose some of the assets out of the other side. So I think that there's legal frameworks that could help with that, there's regulatory frameworks, but more than anything, I suppose it requires us to recognise the box that we've put ourselves in and to decide that that box is no longer fit for purpose. Because it wasn't a customer and it wasn't actually the government that told us to put people in highly liquid, daily priced investment vehicles. That was our decision. And so it's something that we can change if we can acknowledge the weakness in the existing system. And I think that's probably the hardest part, is having those difficult conversations to point out the fact that what we're doing today isn't going to be fit for purpose for the future. And so help from the regulator and any kind of legal perspective or policy perspective would be incredibly helpful, because it's not just one that my organisation needs to deal with, it's one that we as an industry are all conforming to and all trying to track each other so nobody looks particularly bad. So we all need to recognise that and move forward from that as well.
And would you say, you and Laetitia, the question is for you too, but there is a sort of pride, not only for your clients or your customers, but for you and for your employees. Is there a sort of pride to, with this state of mind, to manage with this state of mind your assets? Because it's something very, very positive to work with this state of mind.
Yeah, of course, I think that Econtex trustees are proud to say that we're always trying to do better. So, and for that we work with our peers. They are proud that, as I said, 6% of Econtex assets are invested to finance ecological transition. They were very proud to announce our investment strategy in the oil and gas sector. But over the long run, I think it's more efficient to have core value that help you implement all the decisions. I mean, it's more efficient, it's more sustainable, and that just pride. But yes, of course, we are all proud, and me as advisor to the president, I'm quite happy to know that I spent my day working on something I truly believe in. And I think it's easier to change when you do it for positive reason, not just when you're doing because of fear, of course.
Casey?
Yeah, I think the concept of being proud has really hit home at Lloyds Banking Group. So Lloyds Banking Group was a huge contributor to the 2008 financial experience within the UK, becoming government owned. And for a long time, people who worked there didn't want to say that they worked there. So if they were at the pub with friends and someone said, "Where do you work?" they would say, "Oh, I'm a used car dealer," instead of saying that they worked in a bank. And that's starting to shift. So we've done quite a lot of colleague engagement, and I've spoken at quite a lot of internal conferences. And the reach back from colleagues has been immense, wanting to be involved, even if it's not part of their day job, and starting to see that the bank can have a really positive role in society. The new strapline is to help Britain prosper, and as far as straplines go, it's pretty ambitious. Prosperity, that's a big word, isn't it? Not just financial returns, but I think when we start talking about some of the practical activities that are happening day to day, that's where people think that they can get involved in something that matters, and it makes a difference. And they can see that the job that they're going to do is going to contribute positively. I suppose on the practical level, certainly the guys that did the recent solar panel deal, they were very proud. I think right down at those kind of individual levels, it makes such a difference to know that you're doing something that matters. The driving force for me is, the previous speaker spoke about her children. Mine is a little based in fear. It's so when my children are my age, which is over 30 but under 50, I want to be able to tell them that I did everything that I could to try and avoid terrible climate change, and I want to be able to say that honestly, and that's the thing that gets me up every day. And I think if you can feel that you're playing that part, that's a huge driver and motivation.
Thank you. Thank you, Casey, Rainer, and Laetitia Tanque. Thank you. You can join the audience. Catherine and Padraig, yeah, thank you. Catherine and Padraig, you stay with us because you are our critical friends today. And I will call now, and please join me on stage, Mr. Conway, Mr. François Riahi, Mr. Yves Giquero, and Joachim Alpen. Bienvenue, welcome. Catherine, we start with you again. Bank financing for extreme fuels increased by 11% last year. We said that. Is it, would you say, as Padraig said, that it's a matter of political context in the world? Is it a Trump effect? One of.
So Donald Trump isn't helping any of this, that's for certain. But I think the fundamentals are that executives in banks look at some of these fossil fuel financing opportunities and think those still look good to us. So we've got a problem there, and that whilst we've seen a huge and hugely welcome growth in green financing from banks, whether it's green bonds or green loans or just, there's a lot of really good product innovation going on the green side. It's not being matched with a retreat from financing high carbon activities, and that fossil fuels is just the start of it. We've also obviously got still a lot of very high carbon business models which have potential to be decarbonized in many large industrial sectors. But I really want to emphasize that there is some tremendous activity going on in the European banking sector, and beginning to be picked up elsewhere in the world. So can I just name a couple of really interesting examples? I think ING is doing some really, really interesting work to look at using kind of quite innovative tools to figure out, within particular sectors, which are the companies that have potential to really transition their business models. How can we, as a bank, support and support our clients in these different sectors to kind of go on that journey? And I think what we want to see in the banking sector is this real investment in building the capacity inside banks. That we need board level support, absolutely, kind of got to come from the top, but actually banks need to invest in having people with the skills and understanding around what does decarbonizing cement look like in the next 30 years, and how can we be right in the lead in supporting clients? Because although the loans may be quite short term, the client relationships are long term, and what we need to be looking for is banks that are building, that are saying no, bye-bye to business relationships with sectors and individual companies in sectors that just are completely incompatible with the Paris Agreement. And saying not just hello, but how can we help you, to industries and to individual companies inside industries that are willing to go the distance in terms of really shifting their operational model to low carbon. So I'm actually very positive about the potential for the banking sector. I think I'm very positive about the fact that the supervision of the banking sector is now really focusing on this issue. But last year's figures are really frightening and horrible. And it's very important we have them on the table. There's still far too much bank financing of fossil fuels.
François Riahi, je vous voyais opiner du chef, Chief Executive Officer at Natixis. C'est important cette relation, cette implication du banquier ou de l'assureur auprès de ses clients.
Oui, tout à fait. Je crois que nous, banques, on est là pour servir nos clients, on est là pour leur être utile. On est là pour leur être utile en leur apportant les meilleures solutions financières ou les meilleurs investissements. Et aujourd'hui, être utile, c'est penser au long terme et c'est prendre en compte le changement climatique. Et donc, c'est effectivement l'accompagnement de la transition énergétique qui se fait progressivement en resserrant je dirais, nos financements et par d'autres outils sur lesquels on reviendra tout à l'heure. Mais je crois que cette question, ce que vient de dire Catherine sur les relations, on n'est pas juste on ne fait pas des transactions de court terme, on est dans des relations, on sert des clients qui eux-mêmes, leur intérêt est d'accompagner la transition énergétique, parce que s'ils ne le font pas, ils déclineront.
Mr. Kongwei, you are a partner at law firm, co-chair of the International Network of Financial Centers for Sustainability. Welcome in France. With France and some of our Nordics, European partners, your country, China, is the place where to find most advanced financial regulations against climate change. Is it a matter above a matter of public health care and climate change? Is it a matter of leadership, world leadership for China?
Thank you very much, and it's my great pleasure to attending this event. I appreciate this opportunity to share the information and experience in this aspect. I think climate change definitely is very important in China, and it could be one of the most important for the future of the world, for the development, especially as mentioned before, that we are committed through Paris Agreement, and we taking serious measures to achieve those targets. From the top, the central government already announced a couple of top-down measures, regulations, rules, revision laws, etc., to match up with those targets. And we build up we call 5 pilot areas for green finance to encourage the local to develop green finance to support green projects. So, and for international cooperation, as you mentioned, certain top financial centers, including Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, joined FC4S. We work together, try to promote this issue more efficiently, quicker, and faster. In addition to this, I would like to say that climate change is mainly for carbon emission, etc. But in China, we develop green finance would cover broader subjects, including water treatment and soil treatment. So the whole program, including climate change-related carbon emission, we would like to deal with the development with green, with more efforts. Thank you.
But China still is second world responsible for GHG emissions.
Sure. Before I came to Paris, I joined a seminar held by Shanghai Carbon Emission Trade Center, which co-developed with ADB, Asia Development Bank. That's a training scheme. As you may know, that after Paris Agreement, we established 7 carbon trading centers all over China. And from year 2017, we claimed that we will unify it to one national level carbon trading center. which will be built in Shanghai. So for this instance, I think not only the government take measures, but also we are building up the market to encourage the trading to make the carbon emission more marketable and in a high level scale. In addition to this, maybe a lot of people noted in this winter, the Beijing weather is much, much better and bluer than ever before. So I think that's one of the small evidence how much efforts we are taking, even though we have a long way to go, but we really tried our best.
No more fog in Beijing?
No,
more air apocalypse?
Much less, yeah.
Is China careful about environmental issues outdoor? When China goes and invests in other countries, for example in Africa, is your country very careful about environment?
Sure.
Really sure?
Yes. I think one thing you may note that tomorrow I will go to UK because between UK and China there is what we call EFD task force. During this procession, we will launch a Belt and Road Green Principle Initiative, which will encourage a lot of financial institutions to sign it. There are 7 principles to make sure that we will invest, the project is green. Of course, in another sphere, it should be affordable to the local country. So it's a combination. We cannot enforce them to do something, but we have intention to do it more clean.
Merci. Thank you. Le point de vue peut-être d'Yves Giquero, bonjour. Vous représentez ici à la fois l'AFD et l'IDFC, puisque l'AFD préside l'IDFC depuis l'an dernier. Peut-être juste une réaction rapide aux propos à l'instant de notre interlocuteur chinois.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tous. Oui, effectivement, l'AFD, son directeur général Rémi Rioux, préside depuis un an IDFC, c'est International Development Finance Club, qui est un club d'institutions financières de banques publiques venues du Nord, mais aussi et surtout du Sud. Du Nord, vous avez l'AFD française, la KfW allemande, la JICA japonaise, la Caisse des dépôts italienne, et vous avez surtout 20 banques publiques de développement nationales et sous-régionales de pays du Sud, parmi les plus importantes, de pays émergents ou de pays en développement. Vous avez la DBSC sud-africaine, vous avez la BNDES brésilienne, vous avez la Caisse des dépôts marocaine, et vous avez également la China Development Bank. Et donc c'est un lieu où nous partageons des expériences, où nous proposons des initiatives. C'est ce club qui était un peu à l'origine de l'initiative Mainstreaming, qui a été lancée à la COP 21, auquel se sont joints d'autres établissements publics et privés financiers de banques, dont beaucoup ici sont représentés dans la salle, et qui permet de mobiliser des financements pour le développement durable et le climat. Nos amis de CPI ont tenu les comptes et comptabilisent la finance climat mobilisée par ces acteurs, et IDFC a engagé près de 200 milliards de dollars l'an dernier, en 2017, sur des financements de projets de développement qui présentent des co-bénéfices climat. Le développement, évidemment, n'est pas opposé au climat, et les banques publiques de développement financent des projets de développement qui présentent des co-bénéfices climat, à la fois sur les segments atténuation et sur les segments adaptation. Et avec nos amis chinois de la China Development Bank, ce type de club est un des rares forums où nous pouvons discuter d'objectifs communs, de la mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2030, des objectifs de développement durable, des engagements pris à la COP 21, et si nous pouvons orienter ou réorienter les stratégies, les financements et les opérations d'acteurs aussi importants que la China Development Bank ou que la BNDES au Brésil vers des investissements qui soient plus conformes à du développement qui soit sobre en carbone, à du développement qui soit résilient, je crois qu'on peut faire changer les choses bien au-delà des financements que nous pouvons mettre en place directement.
Donc vous ne faites pas partie de ceux qui se plaignent du fait qu'il n'y ait pas assez de projets à financer?
Il peut arriver que des projets, qu'on manque de projets à financer, mais nous sommes des banques publiques de développement. Ça veut dire que nous avons la responsabilité d'une action collective au service de l'action publique, au service du développement durable. Et au-delà de financer des projets, nous sommes aussi en dialogue avec les gouvernements, avec les acteurs sur leur politique publique. Et être en dialogue sur les politiques publiques, les appuyer, les conseiller, les orienter, ça peut permettre de mettre en place des cadres réglementaires, des politiques, des systèmes, des institutions qui vont favoriser l'émergence de projets. Quand on discute avec un gouvernement de sa politique énergétique, de sa politique fiscale, de sa politique réglementaire, juridique, législative, on va créer des incitations qui vont permettre l'émergence de projets. Par ailleurs, en tant que banque publique, nous avons également des outils qui permettent de financer directement des études de faisabilité, de financer les acteurs qui vont faire émerger les projets, qu'ensuite on pourra proposer à des financements. Et enfin, nous pouvons appuyer d'autres acteurs locaux, des banques privées ou publiques, qui vont financer elles-mêmes des PME, qui vont financer des porteurs de projets. Et pareil, nous pouvons mobiliser des fonds pour les aider à faire émerger ce type de projet. Et par ailleurs, nous cherchons à avoir un effet catalytique, c'est-à-dire de mobiliser d'autres acteurs qui vont pouvoir mettre en place des financements qui vont accompagner l'émergence et la préparation de projets. On mobilise beaucoup d'argent à Bruxelles, par exemple, auprès de la Commission européenne, pour nous aider à préparer ces projets. Et on mobilise également beaucoup d'argent auprès du Fonds vert pour le climat. Et donc, je crois que la finance climat était un petit peu précurseur, était un peu pionnière dans la mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2030 pour le développement durable, en inventant des systèmes, des mécanismes et des outils qui permettent l'émergence de projets, la définition de politiques publiques favorables au climat et le financement de projets qui y concourent.
Je parlais à l'instant avec Hongwei des externalités positives ou négatives des investissements chinois, notamment en Afrique. Pour vous, le continent africain, où l'AFD est très présente, est-ce que ça peut devenir un laboratoire? Plusieurs pays africains commencent à se poser la question du modèle de développement qui leur est proposé depuis près de 60 ans et se rendent compte de l'impact du développement à l'occidental sur l'environnement, dont ils sont les premières victimes puisqu'ils subissent l'impact du réchauffement climatique. Ils se posent la question d'un autre modèle de développement. Est-ce que ce type de projet, de changement de paradigme intéresse l'AFD?
Évidemment, c'est même au centre de l'agenda global. Les ODD qui ont été adoptés en 2015, ils disent 3 choses très importantes. La première chose, c'est que tous les pays sont en transition, tous les pays sont dans des trajectoires et que les ODD s'appliquent à tous. On parle ici, Madame la ministre Brune Poirson parlait de la transition écologique, transition énergétique en France. Ça veut bien dire que la France est également sur des trajectoires et doit bouger. Et les pays africains ou les pays en développement doivent également bouger. Et tout le monde doit converger vers une zone où nous pourrons allier à la fois le bien-être humain, réduction des inégalités, la santé, l'éducation, le niveau de vie, mais également avec des modèles de développement qui ne viennent pas compromettre la soutenabilité écologique, l'empreinte écologique du développement. Donc on ne peut plus dire qu'il y a un modèle occidental et la notion de rattrapage est totalement dépassée et totalement désuète. Rattraper quoi? Rattraper des modèles qui ne sont pas soutenables, parce que ces modèles ne sont pas soutenables. Donc on n'est pas du tout là-dessus. Et on dépasse également ces clivages nord-sud avec des donneurs de leçons ou des gens qui viendraient appliquer des recettes toutes faites. L'essence de ce club IDFC, c'est justement un espace de dialogue où des acteurs du monde entier, de pays dits développés, de pays dits en développement, même si justement ces frontières-là aujourd'hui sont dépassées, peuvent dialoguer, partager des expériences et construire ensemble des solutions. Et donc la notion même d'aide publique au développement, elle est un petit peu dépassée. Nous, on cherche à proposer de nouveaux mots, de nouveaux termes, de nouveaux concepts, et on parle plutôt aujourd'hui de la notion d'investissement solidaire de développement. C'est pas de l'aide, c'est de l'investissement. L'investissement, ça veut dire qu'on attend un retour. On va attendre un retour sur les grands équilibres, un retour sur la paix, sur la stabilité, sur une planète. Solidaire, ça veut dire qu'on est tous concernés, et c'est le message des ODD, et de développement, passer pour le développement durable. Et je reviens au message des ODD qui est très important. Les ODD s'appliquent à tous. Nous sommes tous en transition. Les ODD sont indivisibles, ça veut dire qu'on ne peut pas en choisir un et laisser tomber les autres, et ça c'est le message des Gilets jaunes. On ne peut pas opposer l'écologie, l'urgence écologique, l'urgence de la transition énergétique avec la réduction des inégalités. C'est pas possible, les deux doivent aller de pair. Et le troisième message des ODD, c'est l'universalité de mise en œuvre. Tout le monde est responsable de mettre en œuvre les ODD, ce n'est pas la seule affaire des gouvernements, c'est l'affaire des banques, des institutions financières, des entreprises, des ONG et des citoyens.
Merci beaucoup. Joachim Alpen, Executive Vice President of the SEB Group and co-head of Division Large Corporates and Financial Institutions. Tell us about SEB Group policy.
Right,
It's
thank
single.
you.
It's
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for inviting me. Going back, and I think I'll refer a bit back to what Catherine said also, but it's interesting the word policy in this, because I would say there is often an overbelief in policy, especially within profit-driven organizations. And I can just tell very shortly our story. We've had CSR policies of different kinds for a long, long time. They've been developed, and they are, to a large extent, there are a long list of exclusions, things we should not be doing. And that's good, that keeps us on the right track. But they're very hard to be the tool to get an engagement and a commitment around really driving change. And the way for us that change has been driven is through sitting down with stakeholders, with customers and suppliers, and really talking about long-term challenges we all face, and trying to identify those and making a business model out of trying to solve those. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what a bank is. It's a financial intermediary. And this is 12, 13 years ago, we started more and more meeting a lot of frustration among fixed income investors that they could not get beyond what's called the general corporate purposes, which is written into loan documents and bond documents, that the proceeds will go to general corporate purposes. And we started talking to them about that and engaging the World Bank, and how could we change that? And that's how the green bond concept was created. And I think the green bond has since then lifted, it's flown. It's, in terms of overall sort of bond issuance, is still small, but it's significant. I would say that the biggest change that the green bonds have achieved is not so much the capital they've raised. Some of those projects, a lot of them, will probably be financed anyway. It's the awareness and the responsibility and the interest for the question that is raised. And if you look at for the investors, they can no longer also hide between general corporate purposes. They can actively invest green. And they do, many of them do. They see the benefits of it, and they can prove, I mean, we've been doing it long enough now that they can prove that it has a sort of, it's financially judged too. It's safer and more protected investments. So I think it's creating what we see in our markets, an ever-increasing demand for green investments, which on one side makes it, of course, even more attractive to issue green bonds. And that's, I would say, where the even bigger change has been, is on the issuer side. Because it's a bit cumbersome, and it's not very easy to issue your first green bond. And we should know, we've helped more sort of inaugural issuers than anybody else. So you have to ring-fence the assets, you pledge a commitment to the future in terms of impact reporting, and you often meet a bit of internal resistance to do so. Once you overcome that, you have issued, you've seen the benefits of it, you come into a totally different mindset, which is, of course, now say that that bond is 10% of your total financing, and it's been a success. Why stop at 10? Why not move it to 15? Our competitors at 20. We can't be at 15. We need to move to 25. It creates a very virtuous circle, and that in itself drives change among our customers. So that's really the way we have gotten energy, and the way we've put resources into this is by identifying a business model that is attractive for us and long-term sustainable.
You're a leader on green bonds markets, but you also serve green loans.
Yeah, green mortgage loans. That's a fairly new product, and it's the same concept. It's seeing that it's basically we give a 10 basis point discount to people who invest or buy flats or houses that are on an energy classification, the highest, an A and a B class in Sweden. And the underlying belief in that is simply that these residents will, one, they will pay less for energy going forward. It's the biggest source of energy consumption in a country like Sweden is housing, or heating of housing. And these assets will long-term also be more attractive. They will have a higher sort of higher second-hand value. So it's a better, higher quality asset stock. So there's no sort of charity element in it. It's simply just identifying a stock of housing that has higher quality and is more attractive, and hence should get cheaper financing. Yeah.
And how are your shareholders involved? How are they involved?
Well, I think our shareholders, both stakeholders and shareholders, are supportive. But it's very important to, I mean, no one will ever object if you say that, you know, we are in a successful way sort of working with climate change, of course. That's a no-brainer. But it would certainly, if there was a belief that we were doing this sort of for a greater good and not for their good, it would certainly, there would be a heated discussion around that. I mean, we would not be doing our fiduciary duty. But there isn't, and we can prove that there's a business model, and a long-term successful business model for us in working on this. So it's generally very positively viewed, I would say.
And are you a sort of alien in your country, or is it the Sweden way of business, of financial business?
No, we're not aliens. We like to think of ourselves as being in the forefront, but in some markets, and it's not only the Nordics, it's the Netherlands, it's France. There's plenty of it's still islands from a global perspective, where this is catching. I mean, this is getting a lot more traction. I mean, we today issue 30% of all bonds we issue are green. I think it's something like a sixth of all outstanding Swedish krona bonds are green. So it's not only us. I think the whole financial industry is moving that way, and is very much driven to begin with from the investor side, really believing that they will achieve better returns, long-term sustainable returns, by investing sustainably. And that I think that's really where the demand started. We've been trying to facilitate that, and I think the corporate industry has come around to sort of seeing all the benefits of this, and quite frankly, the increased profitability of within their technology, within their sector, being leading in sustainable technology.
Catherine, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting, this question about the shareholders in the banks. I mean, given how critical banking is to the achievement of the Paris goals, it's actually super important that institutional investors that are holders of stock in commercial banks are really on the front foot. And that's, I think, something I would say has really begun to shift just in the last 12 months. And that we're seeing the kind of institutional investors that are in Climate Action 100 plus, big long-term pension funds beginning to think, actually, this conversation about climate can't just be about a dialogue with fossil fuel holdings. It actually really needs to be with, in addition, totally strategic sectors like finance and both insurance and banking. And I one of the high-profile announcements in the banking sector this year was Standard Chartered saying that they were, not going to finance coal anymore around the world. Well done, Standard Chartered. That was driven in part by a lot of conversations that took place between institutional investors and the board of Standard Chartered, saying, do you know what? We've realized that actually that doesn't look good anymore. But you made a really good point, which is that there's a little bit of sort of reluctance still amongst the investors to really see the logic of this position through. So what we're seeing is a sort of slight sort of cherry picking of the nice, easy bits, the bits where, it looks, I mean, as you say, green mortgages, why not? What's not to like? Green bonds, what's not to like? But do we see institutional investors saying, actually, no, we're not going to refinance corporate debt of high carbon companies that don't have a Paris compliant business model? Or are we really actually going to use our votes to take people off the boards of companies that haven't got a Paris compliant business model? So I think where the institutional investment community says, okay, let's manage a certain type of climate related risk, but not yet really plunge into saying we're actually going to be part of the solution, and we're actually not going to support and finance activities in the global economy that are incompatible with Paris. We're not there yet. That's the next step.
Thank you. Justement, excellente transition pour vous, François Riahi. Alors ici en France, à quel point les grands établissements comme le vôtre sont prêts à s'impliquer, à opérer leur mue. On va parler dans un instant du Green Weighting Factor que vous avez annoncé l'an dernier, et sur cette capacité des grands établissements français à s'impliquer dans ces sujets, comme le disait à l'instant Catherine.
Alors, je vais parler pour Natixis et pour le groupe BPCE, mais effectivement, nous, on est complètement engagés dans un mouvement, dans une trajectoire. Nous avons annoncé que nous sortions du charbon, du financement du charbon en 2015. On a fortement poussé sur le renouvelable. On a créé, nous aussi, une équipe, un Green Hub qui travaille avec tous nos métiers pour proposer à tous nos clients dans tous les secteurs des financements verts. Et je crois qu'on est dans la bonne direction. On a reçu cette année le prix de la banque la plus innovante sur la finance verte par The Banker, ce qui a évidemment rendu tous nos collaborateurs extrêmement fiers. Par rapport aux chiffres que vous donniez, nous avons réduit les financements que nous avons arrangés entre 2015 et 2017 d'à peu près 12% dans les énergies fossiles. On les a augmentés de plus de 50% dans les énergies renouvelables. Donc, je crois qu'on fait ce qu'on dit. Et les engagements qui sont pris, et c'est vrai qu'ils sont pris en particulier par des banques françaises aussi, hein, pas seulement évidemment par des banques nordiques, par toute une série de banques, ce sont des choses qui contribuent finalement pour tout le secteur, puisque finalement ça crée un mouvement et aucune institution n'est insensible à ce que font ses compétiteurs, à ce que font leur environnement. Et je pense que la décision de Standard Chartered que vous citiez, elle vient aussi du fait que d'autres banques avaient arrêté le charbon et que donc c'est possible.
Il y a un effet d'entraînement. Parlez-nous du Green Rating Factor que vous avez mis en place chez Natixis et vous l'aviez annoncé au Climate Finance Day de l'année dernière. Où en est-on? Est-ce que ça marche?
Alors, effectivement, c'est un outil innovant. On est pour l'instant les seuls à le mettre en place. On espère être les premiers, en fait, et que d'autres vont suivre. Alors, peut-être déjà revenir sur ce que c'est, parce que c'est un petit peu technique. En fait, ça revient à prendre le risque climatique dans nos financements, puisque la réglementation bancaire nous impose de mettre une certaine quantité de capital en face de chaque financement en fonction de son niveau de risque. Mais le risque climatique n'est pas pris en compte. Donc ce que nous faisons d'un point de vue interne, hein, et donc on ajoute à l'élément réglementaire le fait de dire pour chaque financement, est-ce qu'il contribue positivement à la transition climatique? Si oui, on va lui réduire un petit peu la consommation de capital qu'il génère. Et puis s'il contribue négativement d'un point de vue climatique, à ce moment-là, on va rajouter plus de capital et donc finalement, on va envoyer un signal prix dans toute la banque qui fait qu'un financement vert sera visiblement plus profitable que selon les normes réglementaires et au contraire, un financement brun sera moins profitable. Donc c'est le fait de mettre un signal prix dans notre portefeuille, c'est un gros travail. Donc on est en cours de mise en place puisqu'en fait ça suppose que tous nos financements soient évalués de ce point de vue-là. Donc il y a toute une taxonomie qui est en train d'être mise en place. On va commencer l'Europe au premier trimestre 2019, ensuite on l'étendra au reste du monde dans l'année 2019. On aura aussi une analyse externe de notre taxonomie et de notre système pour avoir une opinion tierce sur la manière dont on fait. Et finalement, donc je ne peux pas vous dire si ça marche puisque ce n'est pas encore vraiment en place. Ça sera en place à partir de 2019, mais c'est un travail qui nous a nécessité toute l'année pour le mettre en place. Mais ce que ça veut dire, c'est qu'on va avoir à partir de 2019 un vrai outil d'incitation pour aller vers plus de financement vert dans toute la banque et un outil de pilotage. Et ça, c'est un élément qui est, à mon avis, fondamental et qui, je dirais, va continuer. Comme je donnais les chiffres tout à l'heure, je pense qu'on est plutôt dans la bonne direction. Mais en tout cas, on pourra le mesurer encore plus justement parce que ce sera fin au niveau de chaque financement.
Et alors, cette année, vous nous annoncez le next step, l'étape suivante.
Oui, parce qu'en fait, Joachim et Catherine l'ont dit, en fait, la question, c'est de mettre en place un cercle vertueux entre les émetteurs et donc ceux qui cherchent du capital, ceux qui cherchent des financements ou de l'equity, et ceux qui en fournissent. Et c'est un peu une question de cercle vertueux, c'est-à-dire que plus les investisseurs auront de l'appétit pour les financements verts, et plus il y aura une incitation de la part de ceux qui cherchent du capital à utiliser ces instruments et à réorienter leurs projets vers des projets verts. Et donc dans ce cadre-là, en tant qu'assureur, et je rejoins Catherine, en tant qu'assureur non-vie, nous ressentons très, très clairement, en particulier cette année, les événements climatiques sont incroyablement plus violents et plus coûteux que les années précédentes. Et donc, dans notre partie assurance vie, nous avons pris l'engagement de nous mettre en conformité avec la trajectoire de degrés, c'est-à-dire que nous allons investir au moins 10% de nos nouveaux investissements chaque année sur des instruments verts. ce qui fait qu'en 2030, ce sera au moins 10% de notre stock qui sera composé d'instruments verts. Évidemment, on a défini cette trajectoire en prenant en compte ce qu'on pouvait anticiper sur la production d'instruments de finances vertes. Si, comme nous l'espérons et comme nous essayons d'y œuvrer, ce marché se développe plus rapidement que ce que nous prévoyons, évidemment, on ira plus vite. Mais déjà, cette trajectoire nous met en conformité avec la trajectoire de degrés.
Eh bien, merci beaucoup. Patrick, in 1 minute, maybe a conclusion for this panel.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think there's a lot of activity going on, as we've heard, a lot in general different segments of the financial markets. We're still seeing, a lot of it being seen as early days, because as we can see, the very first figures that we start out with, in terms of the overall stock in financial markets and capital markets, there's still a long way to go. But I would kind of conclude that, we will see soon what happens when the overall macroeconomic environment changes. So, at the moment, for the previous few years, we've had a very low interest rate environment. So we'll see, as they say, when the tide goes out, you see who's wearing the shorts. And we'll see how also a lot of the commitments and the rhetoric that investors and corporations are doing, whether that will be seen in how the cost of capital will change for corporations or for countries who are not meeting up to the commitments of meeting a low carbon and climate resilient development pathway.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine, Patrick, Conway, François Riahi, Joachim, Alban, and Ivy Gikeo. Thank you. You can join the audience.